Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody. This is Howard Fox from the Success Insight podcast. For my co-host, Randy Ford, I want to welcome you to a really exciting episode today. My guest is Dr. Keis. Ken is the president and CEO of Consulting Resources Group International. They're actually located in one of my favorite cities, Vancouver, British Columbia. CRG is the global leader in personal and professional development. Their work includes fast-paced, learner-friendly assessments, training programs, in-person webinars, e-courses. CRG is also a consulting and coaching services organization, and they specialize in helping others achieve professional mastery through skill development and self-awareness processes. Ken's also the host of his own podcast. Imagine that. The podcast is Secrets of Success with Dr. Keis. He's also an author of a number of books, including Why Aren't You More Like Me? Discover the Secrets to Understanding Yourself and Others, The Quest for Purpose, and Deliberate Leadership, Creating Success Through Personal Style. Wow. Ken, welcome to the Success Insight podcast.
Well, Howard, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be able to serve.
You know, when I was introduced to you via our LinkedIn and our messages that went back and forth, I was really excited because I'm like, I love talking to other professionals who are in the coaching profession, and especially ones that were in the coaching profession before it was actually called a coaching profession. They were just professional development. And there's just so much we could talk about. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to start this company, Consulting Resources Group.
Well, when you think about life, sometimes it doesn't necessarily go how you envisioned it. I knew when I was 16 years of age that I was destined to be a speaker in some form or another, but I actually grew up on the dairy farm. And I'm the firstborn male, third generation, Eastern European descent. There was a little pressure for me to stay on the dairy farm. I went to agricultural college, came home, and after about 2 years of work with my dad, I think murder would have been pretty well what was going to occur.
Oh boy.
So he was old school European style, do what I say, no communications, that kind of stuff. Not that he was mean-spirited, but he just didn't have any kind of leadership. I just couldn't tolerate it. So I left and worked for the Federal Department of Agriculture. And then I moved into and was offered a job in sales, in agricultural sales, which was my background. From there, what happened was there was an opportunity. A friend of mine started a sales training franchise. I knew I wasn't going to be in this sales profession forever as far as selling agricultural feed to dairy farmers. So I bought my own sales training franchise and I got into the industry in 1989. 30 years as we record this interview. And, who knows when you're listening to this in 2030 or something like that. That was the beginning of it. And then I ran into Dr. Terry Anderson, who is the founder of CRG. So CRG is in its 40th year at a chamber event. And it's interesting, Howard, when we think about life, is that I'd never been to a chamber lunch and learn before at this time. Terry was there, had a little booth. I met him, and within 2 weeks, we'd kind of moved our offices together in the same location. And then Terry being a professor of criminology and leadership, and then you were mentioning Jim Kouzes and the leadership sort of practices. Well, he's a colleague. He's endorsed a couple of our books. In fact, the Why Aren't You More Like Me book, Jim has endorsed that. Through that, I went and did my MBA and then later my Ph.D. I was with CRG, VP of Marketing, doing some training. And then I was very fortunate, Howard. I'm a faith person, but the series of events where Chrysler was doing the largest customer service training event, if you want to call it, or project in the history in North America. And that's when Lee Iacocca was leaving and these cars called LHs and the Intrepid were being made in the early 90s. And I got selected to be the team lead for Western Canada. And there was 250 trainers between the US and Canada that trained hundreds of thousands of people within 16 weeks. And it was really to change the service mindset of Chrysler. Well, there were 4 or 5 people in Canada asked to come back to lead the training initiative for the company. And I was one of those 5 people.
That's fantastic.
And so then myself and another individual were the sole source provider of all soft skills development for nearly a decade. And a little blip happened. And I don't say that lightly, but 9/11 occurred. We had 12 full-time trainers. We were traveling around the country. I was on the road 300 days a year for nearly over 6 years, Howard. I would not recommend that. I had a small family. Nearly cost me my marriage.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the success was great. The experience was great. Doing 1,500 presentations in that short 5 or 6 years of time. You know what? You get better. Developing 40 courses for them from soup to nuts and all the trainer guidelines and everything from customer service communications, using our personality or personal style assessment in that, replacing DISC as part of what they were doing. But then when 9/11 happened, the next week they canceled the contract.
Right.
So as many companies did. In a way, it was a godsend. The opportunity to buy CRG came up, and I bought CRG in 2002. And so here we are 17, 18 years later. And the person who knew as much about the company as the founders was myself and another person, Eleanor, who's still at the company after 35 years. We were working together on our automotive consulting. And so I took over CRG at that time.
It's amazing as it look back at a chance meeting in a chamber.
Yeah, if that didn't happen, I don't know what would have occurred. All the work, what happened after I bought CRG. CRG was a bit of an absentee ownership because the owners had moved on to different things. And it was just kind of hanging out with 1.5 employees, just filling orders once in a while, no business development. Being on the road and nearly costing my health. And, we were talking about health before going on the show. I shifted from being a speaker who was writing to a writer that now speaks. I never thought that would be possible because my story includes in grade 9, my English teacher saying I would never amount to anything because I couldn't read or write.
I got to stop you for a second. What you just said is incredibly amazing. I did an internship with the United Auto Workers back when I was out of graduate high school, went to college, got my bachelor's, and went to get my master's in health and public administration. I did my internship with the United Auto Workers. The gentleman there, one of the assistant directors, I overheard him say, he can't write. He's not any good at it. And I remember to myself, I never want somebody to tell me that again. And it's amazing that we can go from this little event, somebody saying something to you or me overhearing something can have a profound impact because a lot of what you're doing now is you're writing and you're now have the ability to share it with the masses.
Thank you for that, Howard. When we think about our story, and this is, the podcast is really to serve you, the audience listener. And our stories are hopefully encouragements to it. What we really discovered later on, I was in school before computers. I know there was life before computers, before the internet, because a lot of us had intranet. There wasn't internet. There was intranet. As part of that, what was discovered was this little program called Word. I started to learn how to use a computer. I started typing. And then, of course, the program was saying, oh, by the way, Ken, your grammar sucks. The spelling is incorrect. And when I was doing my MBA, it was discovered I was dyslexic. Well, so the dyslexia is minor. It's mild. And I always had verbal prowess. So when I was 16, that's why the speaker thing came out. I love communicating. Even as a teenager, I was asked to be MC of many of the community events because I had this presence on stage. Love doing it. It was just easy peasy, being sort of the general manager of an event and communicating and having some fun with people. And they enjoyed that. So I knew that I felt comfortable in front of others. a couple of times I've been nervous on the stage. People say, do you get nervous? I said, no, I've done 3,000 paid presentations over the last 30 years. I don't get nervous. I just don't. And it just doesn't happen. Now, do I get excited? Do I get anxious? Absolutely, because I want to get going. Sort of like a racehorse ready to get out onto the track.
Right.
After buying CRG, what I did is I shifted, and because the travel nearly cost me my marriage, is I then stayed and I took 10 years to revise all the content in the company. And so I was pretty well writing 70 to 75% of the time to redo all the assessments. We have 10 core assessments that live into 12 reports. And all our tools are for developing individuals. So anybody can go online this very moment, go take the assessment and benefit from it because we designed it for the learner. If you go back 30 years ago, psychology used to teach this, Howard, is that the psychologist says, I'm the only person qualified to tell you who you are because you couldn't possibly know. I hate that, right? Is that we want to create an independent relationship rather than a codependent relationships. Other assessments say, well, you need to be certified, you need to do this, and you have to talk to Howard, be able to figure out who you are. And I said, no, I don't want that. And yes, having Howard as a coach help you understand the report adds value, adds clarity, adds perspective. But going forward, I want that client to be independent or interdependent so that they can live and make their own decisions. They're not going to have us on speed dial every 5 minutes to say, Howard, what should I decide in this situation?
Ken, let me ask you a couple questions. First of all, a statement for anybody that's listening to this podcast and you've just heard kind of Ken share the start of a story. And, I briefly acknowledged this chance meeting he had at a chamber event. When I walk down the street and I see people looking down at their smartphones, what really bothers me about that is, number one, they can get hurt because they're walking right into an intersection, and that happens. Mm-hmm. I always wondered, and I wrote an article on LinkedIn a long time ago, a couple of years ago, what chance events, what meetings are not going to occur because you were looking down at your smartphone. I met Ken via LinkedIn. We had a conversation. We talked about podcasting, leadership, and now he's here. But if I had never had the chance and looked up and say, hey, Ken looked at my profile, I looked at his, we never would be here having this conversation. And therefore, we don't know what will happen as a result of it. So it struck a chord when you talked about that meeting, Ken. Is this a chance meeting? So you got to look up when you're walking down the street, talk to people, smile at people, get into conversations, get out of that smartphone. I'm sorry, that's a little bit of a soapbox, but it jumped out at me.
I do our 3-day certification program now for 15 years, and I've had professionals from all around the world in the room. And I was just actually revising the slide deck for our upcoming event because I'm constantly doing data research, and one of our tools is a self-worth inventory. Did you know that the more that you're on social media, the lower your self-worth? There's actually verified data on that. In fact, depression and loneliness has never been higher. I'm a father of millennials, so I can speak to this. My kids, I have a bias, they're pretty grounded and centered. But if the more we stay sort of in that sort of social media space, the more depressed we become. And so getting out and having this interaction. Now we're doing people, this is audio podcast, but we're on Zoom and we can see each other. So this connectiveness, human beings are meant to connect. Right. Social media, and of course, the discord online is all sort of these angry comments. I don't care what side you're on, how people are speaking to one another is inappropriate. It's just not okay. And yet, we are now making it just sort of standard protocol that I'm going to be abusive towards you as soon as I get on because I disagree with you. Well, you would never speak that way to a total stranger on the street unless maybe you were a protester, but I'm not. I'm trying to build a relationship with you. I'm not going to operate in that way. So I get that where we're not paying attention. Marshall Goldsmith, I've had a chance to be invited to a private event with Marshall and been on the stage with him at way back when. But part of it is most of the people are not participating. They're being amused. And so we're amusing ourselves. We're fans. We're not participants. We're not players. So it says, well, I'm playing. No, you're not. You're just amusing yourself. And we know that social media streams have now been created to be addictive. You have this dopamine rush, as a health consultant, you get this in. We know that this can be as addictive as sugar or cocaine or one of those different items. And once you're in, you can't get out. There's research is that in China alone, it was 400 on the way to 500 million individuals who are addicted to their devices. I mean, there's 1.5 billion people there, but even so, a third of the population are addicted.
That's amazing.
Now, we want you to listen to podcasts. When we think about it, that's what really has transformed even our industry. And for those people who are listening, there is no excuse to not get more information that can help us grow. That's why I have a podcast as well, is be able to, at any time, at any place, you can now have your phone out with accessing information that will help you to develop. I was at a breakfast meeting yesterday with a speaker that did some significant research. This multi-billion-dollar bank did research about the future and where we want to go. The jobs that some of our kids will do aren't even invented yet. But he said it all distilled down to this. If you don't develop your soft skills and are not a continuous learner, you will not make it in the new economy. And he says, contrary to what people think, Artificial intelligence is not going to erode jobs. It's going to increase jobs. The multiple effect and what's occurring in the economy is that this technology is actually growing. He was showing a paper in 1938 said automation is going to kill employment. Well, employment in the US has never been, when we're recording this, so I don't know when you're listening to this, has never been lower, unemployment. So when we think about, technology is going to host you out, no, it isn't. I mean, we're doing a Zoom call or recording a podcast. Somebody is programming Zoom. Then you have an editor that's editing the show. You know what? Employment's increasing because of technology.
Lots of opportunities. And even with the advent of technology, artificial intelligence, and as you rightly said, soft skills, whether that's a bad word or not, but the ability to communicate, listen, have a conversation is going to be even more important. Ken, I'd love to change gears just a little bit. When we first had our conversation, I had mentioned to you, some of the work that I do with business owners and around coaching, leadership development. I use a number of tools as well, like Myers-Briggs. In fact, that was the first instrument that I've got certified in when I went through coach training, because all my other fellow coaches were all OD and HR professionals. So I said, I guess I should get certified in Myers-Briggs. I then, as I was finishing up my coach training as part of the ICF credential, in my program, I had to be coached. And my own coach, who was a PhD, introduced me to the DISC. And when he introduced it to me, I was blown away, because right away I could see, oh my God, this is why I do what I do. These are the types of people that I struggle with, literally project after project. I mentioned that I enjoyed the Northwest in British Columbia, Vancouver. I was on the most miserable project of my life in Victoria, British Columbia. Ken, how can you be miserable in Victoria, British Columbia?
Well, that's because that's the capital, and there's lots of government agencies that would frustrate you there.
That was my epiphany that I need to do something different with my life, kind of like you with traveling, or I'm going to die alone in a hotel room. And that's really what got me back into going to school and coach training. Well, my coach introduced me to the DISC, and I love the DISC. I use it all the time. CRG has the PSI. And so what I'd love to inform our listeners about this instrument, because it's pretty much foundational to a lot of the work you're doing in your organization. Maybe it's considered the kind of like the door frame. It's you enter through this type of tool, the book. Why is it different, and how are you using it to help your clients?
Well, thank you, Howard, for that. And multiple sort of responses. First of all, we built our tool out of our wanting to improve both the experiences from MBTI and DISC. So we actually use both, and we actually built our tool out of it, and we wanted to design it differently. So I'll talk about that in a second. But prior to that, here's why understanding personality or personal style is so important. Talent Smart, which is a competitor, it's related to Kenneth Blanchard's work, did some studies and said, what percentage of people will realize their potential without knowing their personal style or / personality? And it's only 2%. And here's why. We asked this question, are we nature or are we nurture? And I cover this in the book, Wired to More Like Me. And the answer is we're both. So if you're a parent and you have 2 kids and you have the same parents and you have the same environment, but your kids are different. And we ask, so why are they different? Well, they are biologically wired differently. Not right, not wrong, just different. And so when we think about how we get things done, everybody's talking about sort of the strengths-based movement, right? How do I play to my strengths? But, I need to understand, what are my deficiencies and how do I address that? Do I hire people to compliment me and that kind of stuff? If I don't know my style, then I am not equipped to make intentional decisions. I'm flying blind. I'm in the fog bank. Dr. Tasha York's written the New York Times best-selling book called Insights. Interesting enough, it's connected to your show name. And Tasha did this work and said, okay, this word mindfulness, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, all the verbs are out there. So she did research with her students, said, what percentage of people believe that they're self-aware? Meaning, Howard, how you think about yourself and how other people experience you are congruent. 95% of people said, I'm pretty good. I know myself. I know how I come across. I know what other people think of me. Well, here's what she did. With her students, she went out there. You know that only 10% of people agreed with other people's opinion of themselves. 85% of people are delusional. They don't even know that they don't know that they don't know. So how am I going to lead others? How am I going to grow others? It involves every single person on the planet needs this information. I don't care what culture you're from. We're in 12 different languages in over 30 countries. And it doesn't matter if it's from Japan, if it's China, if it's the US, if it's Canada, if it's the UK, France, Egypt. I mean, we have clients in Saudi Arabia using it in Arabic. Is that every single person has this baseline. And thank goodness for that. It brings us consistency. So we believe your personal style, or other people call personality, is consistent throughout your lifetime. And here's why that's important. If that was not true, Howard, you'd be like me and I'd be like you tomorrow. You're listening. You can actually count on you being you tomorrow morning. You imagine getting up in the morning and you want to be a firefighter, and tomorrow you actually want to be a teacher, and the day after you want to be a pilot. And how your nature and how you go about yourself is inconsistent, we'd be like chaos, absolute chaos. So first of all, style is congruent, consistent throughout our lifetime, and our preferences, we call it preferences, our natural predisposition to perceive, approach, and interact with the environment, which includes time, people, tasks, and situations, is consistent. Now, personality in our model, we have a totality model. Then there's also nurture. So all the input, my background, my education. We say, if I have a personal style, am I conscious, awake, and aware of what that style is? So self-awareness. Mm-hmm. Am I mastering that style? So we talk about self-awareness is one thing, Howard. But if I'm a jerk and I don't do anything about it, it's still self-awareness. So I'm self-aware that I'm a jerk. Well, okay. But then next one is self-management. I'm going to manage myself to be more effective with others. And then the third level is self-mastery. This becomes fluid. It becomes a flow. And so not only do I understand myself, I understand you. This is baseline communication. This research said, okay, soft skills, communication's at the core of this. Problem solving is at the core of this. A lot of times, I mean, we know the research, 87% of people are disengaged at work out of 142 countries. Only 13% of the world's workforce even like what they do. I believe one of the contributing factors is what we call job fit. Mm-hmm. The nature of the person does not match the nature of the work, the role, the position. This is different than interests, gifts, and talents. We should never connect our personality to a career path. I disagree with that 100%. We should connect it to a job and role responsibilities. And so what we want to do intentionally as business owners and listeners is, can I have my life congruent and aligned as closely as possible to my gifts, talents, abilities, and personal style, so that I can play to win? Now, this is the strengths-based movement, like Strength Finders and some of those other ones out there. How can I play to my strengths? Be conscious of that. My life will always have stuff in it where I need to address my issues. So we make a statement in our training, I cannot use my style as an excuse for my behavior. This goes back to the jerk comment. Just because I'm a certain way is not a reason for that. You know what? I don't have attention to detail. You go to the IRS and say, listen, I really don't like details, so I'm not submitting my tax reform this year or form this year. That's not going to fly. So I get maybe an accountant or a bookkeeper to help me to do it. That's why it's so important. And then if I'm leading others, I want to do this for all the other people, for my kids, for my staff members, for my team leaders. And then when I have a team, then we have multiple. Kenneth Blanchard talks about the multiple effect. If I have you and I, we have like 3 relationships. Your relationship with self, my relationship with self. Well, actually, it's 4 because you with me and me with you. So I have 4. As soon as I add another third person in, the multiplier goes like, I don't have 3 relationships. I have 9. So where it's time, it's like a root cause. With that is I need to be paying attention as a team for a team to know each other. I might get along with you, Howard, but there's Kevin that's in the room and I'm not getting along with him. So how can I manage Kevin and Ken in their relationships, or Susie or whoever it is, and to get them to intentionally understand the differences? We have people who do marriage seminars. They won't do the seminars without the assessment. In fact, one of our associates was on Oprah 3 times before she shut down her show. She wrote the book, My Husband's Affair Became the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me. And they made a business out of this. And the Why Aren't You More Like Me book, every single participant must get it. And they tried to do a seminar without it, and they couldn't reach the success. When we think about success in life, we have another large client. I can't say who it is, but they have about 30,000 employees. It's been groundbreaking because here's what happens. If I can understand and improve my relationships, and what happened in the company is the HR manager says, this is business only, and we don't want it to apply to personal. Well, every single person in the pilot came back and says, you know what? I'm getting along better with my son. I'm getting along better with my spouse. I'm getting along better with my significant other. Is life is not home and work. It's just life.
You bring a point too, is In learning about the tool, and in the spirit of full disclosure, folks, I do have a copy of Why Aren't You More Like Me? And I did take the personal style indicator. We can have a whole other podcast, and Ken can debrief me and say, Howard, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but the question that I was always curious about, because there's some versions, at least the DISC assessment, where I have my work life and I have my personal life. And I know within my iteration, there is no work and personal life. You are what you are, and talk about congruence and how at least in the work life, your ability to adapt and to have a conversation with individuals. It takes skill. It's not something that necessarily comes natural. It does take a skill and work at it, coaching, to not only learn about yourself, but also learn about the others that you have to interact with, or to help two people who are different to interact. But I was wondering, I guess I just your thoughts on this group, or the folks that still adhere to, I've got my work personality and I have my home personality, because I don't think that's true. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with my colleague, Dr. Alan Weiss, who's written 60 books. I take whoever I am wherever I go.
Yeah.
And I don't really have a work and a home life. Now, what happens is some of the environments are different. So how I manifest my showing up is slightly different, because I might be really stressed at work because of pressures that are coming, and I'm acting out this way, but you haven't changed who you are. I mean, you are biologically the same when you walked into the door, whereas you walked out of the door. So this idea that I am different, I don't believe that at all. In fact, some other tools have taught that. It really has to do with the environment. The other thing that's different with the personal style indicator is that many of the other tools have like 16 patterns. We have 21. Right. There are many individuals, what we call triple high or 4 even. In fact, there's a tool out there that says, if you have a tight score, or all the scores of the 4 dimensions are close, you need to take it over again because you don't exist. I get really angry at that, because that's 5% of the population that take our tool. Another 25% of the population get a triple high pattern, which doesn't even exist in DISC or Myers-Briggs at all. So now I have over 30% of the population that are not represented in other style tools, because we rank all 4 words in the design of it. So now what happens is many of us have sort of a blend or a pattern that is a combination of 2 or 3 different things. In a certain work situation, I might have this coming out. At home, I might have that coming out. I haven't changed. It's just what one of the dimensions am I using at that moment. And so we help people to understand that. I dislike cute in the personality world, where you're a dog, a cat, or
the birds,
or some kind of animal, or there's some that are colors. Here's the reality: is over 90% of the population is a blend of multiple animals, multiple colors, multiple dimensions, whatever descriptor you have of the design of it. If most of us are a blend, then trying to describe myself, you're a dominant, this person, that is not reflective of who that person is. Now, here's the interesting thing. We have 4 dimensions in our model, and the listeners, I'll try to explain this simply. Let's say Howard and I have the same highest score. Let's call it a behavioral action or dominant. But Howard's next score is cognitive analysis, and my next score is affective expressive. Okay, so the expressive. Even though both of our highest scores are identical, the next score and the next dimension is influencing who I am as much. We are completely different people. So to describe Howard and I similarly is doing a disservice to the complexity of who we are. That's one of the things that we've done, is how do we create sort of a simple way to understand that and have the complexity hidden sort of in the design behind it, but also honor the complexity that we all have. A lot of times people feel pigeonholed, or some tools are prescriptive. Right. We go and we say, oh, by the way, you tell the instrument who you are. And start going through this self-discovery and owning your space. And the other thing with our tools, you can get more than one report. If a score is really close, Howard, I'll give you more than one pattern. You don't get that in the other tools. And here's why we do it. So if it's statistically tight, insignificant difference, I want you to read both reports and you to really kind of pull out of that which part of both of those reports is you. I'm not trying to be right as the author of the tool. I'm trying to help you to get self-awareness, consciousness, emotional intelligence, so you can act on it. And this is where, we hold our 3-day certification. I know this sounds a little bit biased, but we had the last group in. I had somebody fly all the way from Australia, a 15-hour flight to come. 65-year-old psychologist in charge of 66 schools for the development. And this is what Alan said at the end of it. He says, Ken, this is the best program I have ever attended in my history of attending professional development workshops. And he meant that sincerely. And here's why, is people are honored through the design. And that's what we really, really wanted. Yes, the other tools are out there. They're worked. We've used them in the past. But we wanted to take it to another level to honor the individual. And then we still use it even with kids like 14 and 15-year-olds. As long as there's literacy around a grade 8, grade 9 read level, and I can discern what the words mean to be able to fill it out, then I can add value. And the younger we can get kids and individuals connected to this, so they can start making intentional decisions, right? I think I was talking in another podcast around how there's so much social pressure to go certain directions, right, Howard? You know, your parents want to tell you to do this, your friends want to do this. And it's not that you're being self-centered. We want you to own your own space, that you can, people's contribution come when you are playing to your strengths in a role responsibility, that your style is being honored, not from a self-centered point of view, but from a self-honoring point of view. Now, here's the other side of that soft skills, if I may, is we also teach a 3-step process on building relationships with others, or credibility. Number 1 is I need to know who this other person is. Number 2 is I'm going to suspend my needs in deference to yours. It's the opposite of what society's doing. In other words, it's the opposite of being self-centered. I'm not changing who I am. I'm not actually adjusting and saying, okay, Ken, you need to be permanently coached to be this other way. But what I'm doing is I'm developing and I'm now mastering my presence in deference for Howard. So what does Howard need? So when we say suspending, most people get offended, hooked, upset way too easy today. And I'm not saying what the other person did was okay or whatever, but you have sidewalk rage, you have road rage, you have online rage, you have all this kind of CRAP. So what we teach people is that nobody makes you angry, nobody irritates you unless you've made a decision to do so. Dr. David Burns wrote the book, Feeling Good. Nobody upsets you unless you. I'm not saying what the person did is okay, but your response is always your choice. It's always your choice. We teach people to suspend, and said the number one reason that people aren't having relationships is them. It's not the other people. And then the third step is, what does Howard need from me right now? Again, rather than talking about my needs, what can I do for you, Howard? How can I do it so that Howard feels comfortable, that he's feeling good about the interaction? And interesting enough, the more that I do that for another person, the more they're willing to do it for me, rather than being self-centered, which, the narcissistic society that we can be part of now. And my wife being an academic coach at university, is 10% of college students are bona fide narcissistic, as from an actual review point of view. Well, stop that. Is that it's about the other person. Yes, I want to be playing to my strengths and honoring myself. But at the same time, we don't live in a vacuum on Survivor Island or Castaway or something like that. We have to do stuff through other people. And so that's where people skills is foundational to our success.
Most definitely. Question that I have, Ken, is I can take this assessment. I can buy the book. I can take the assessment. How do we ensure, or how do you suggest, coach individuals to take the assessment and not feel like this is set in stone, this is who I am, and misinterpret the value that's there, and not look at it as an instrument that I can continue to become more self-aware, inform others about what my needs are, and have my choices. Because I did grow up as well, or go through coach training as well. You deliver assessment, you want to coach, you want to debrief it, you want to coach it. You want to make sure that people don't use it as a tool to pigeonhole someone else. So when you use this tool with your clients, have them consume it, use it, but not, if they don't have the benefits of a coach or a mentor with them, how do you assure they're not using this to harm others? They're using it to develop themselves and create opportunity.
Well, of course, I wish I could control the world, Howard, and make sure that some of those things don't happen. The way that the tool's designed and the narrative that's in the tool, as much as possible, we address those in advance. We even say, please don't pigeonhole people or yourself. We even have that in the narrative. The fact that people get more than one report, 75% of people that take the personal style indicator get more than one report. So in itself is already suggesting this diversity in honoring how it's set up. If people come to our training, then we will beat them and I say that with fun, right?
Yes.
Is that we will be persistent in our communications, that we need to honor people, not pigeonhole. The other thing is we have what we call a personality development factors model, which is included in the report. You have that, it's a second page of your color report. And in that, we honor the development of the whole person. We're already saying, well, what about the health and wellness of the person? I was misdiagnosed as manic depressive in the 80s and found out I was hypoglycemic. So this is what led me into, really being a health coach, is that we have misdiagnosis. Now, guess what? It doesn't matter what my personality is. If I'm in a hypoglycemic low, I'm not going to have energy. I'm normally an energy guy. And so I was suffering with these mood swings, and it was biophysical. It had nothing to do with other things. We talk about self-worth. You and I could have the same personal style, one with high self-worth, one with low self-worth. We talk about that in a separate assessment. We have the wellness assessment has 120 questions in it. Then we talk about culture and how culture has expectations. And we had a professor from Korea that came into our local university in tears after this assessment, said, finally an assessment that honors me. My culture, where I came from for 50 years, told me to be somebody different because I'm a woman and I'm a professor. And she was never allowed to be a leader, and that she was stymied. The next one is social teachers and values. And we have a values assessment, internal behaviors. We believe we're complex individuals. Then we also have a thing called emotional anchors. We've all had events that have happened in our life that create triggers. And then we have a seventh item, which is spirituality. And here's what we mean by that. People's belief system highly influence their direction and what they believe. Even if you believe in nothing, that is your belief system. We take that totality and in upfront, when we teach people, teach them this is one part of you. It's very important. It's not going to change throughout your lifetime, but you have all these other factors that are contributing to your personhood. And so even our model is holistic in that. Nobody else is teaching that I'm aware of, that around this kind of space. And we're just insistent that we look at all of these pieces as part of this journey together and not any singular item. There's no magic pill. There's no one assessment that says, oh, this captures everything. It's all these pieces together. Think about your house. You have flooring, you have walls, you have electrical, you have plumbing. It's not any single thing. All of those make the home. And plus your personhood that's there. Same thing for us too. I get onto this. I've done our training now for 15 years. And it's 34 hours or something like that straight. Sorry if I kind of get onto it, but we're very, very insistent. And I think people that are listening, you want to honor that diversity for yourself and for others as well.
Fantastic. Ken, we're nearing the end of our time together, and it kind of goes to show you the passion you have, I have, and just the information for this podcast and the value. And if our listeners, and I know they will be out there, would like to learn more about you and your work, where's the best place to go?
I'm going to give you two directions. First of all, we have a gift for everybody. Because you've been kind enough to listen to all this point in Howard's podcast and get an insight, this is where you can go to get the free gift. You go to my speaker site, which is Ken Keis, spelled KENKEIS.com/insights. We'll make that plural. And you're going to get a free complimentary ebook, The Quest for Purpose. And so that's normally $30 even for an ebook online. And you'll be able to get that, and you'll download it and be able to participate in that. If you want to learn more about the assessments, then CRG, that's now been around for 40 years, is crgleader.com. We'll get a link to you, Howard, for your show notes if somebody wants to kind of go back on whatever platform, so that they can go through a link from you to be able to discover that. You went and got the Wired to More Like Me book off of Amazon, and included in the book is a free code for the assessment. It's normally $45. We include that free with the book, which is $30. You can go to those different sources and then, talk to Howard or ourselves further, reach out. We always respond. LinkedIn, all the social media platforms, and it's Keis, but it's KEIS. And you'll find me out there somewhere.
That is fantastic. Folks, this gift that Ken has shared with you, Quest for Purpose, take advantage of it. And as Ken just alluded to, we're going to provide all the links in our show notes. We'll have links back to the website, as LinkedIn as well. And to be honest with my listeners, Ken, and with you, is I kind of geek out on this stuff because I've way back when I was alluding to the disc, it was like an epiphany. Yes. Oh my God. And I also recognize, as you have just stated earlier, this is complex stuff. We as human beings, we are complex, and there's no one size fits all And I look at instruments like this as a stepping stone to learning more about ourselves, others, what things we do well in the moment, what things we could do better in the moment. And also when we take on new responsibilities, if we get called upon to lead, manage, supervise people, this is a great place to start. I mean, we know, via Kouzes and Posner and the Leadership Challenge, these are the behaviors that have been shown over 30 years to be, representative of someone who is displaying leadership skills. Well, depending on my personality, style, preference, those leadership behaviors look different. And that's why I love the combination of a tool like this, leadership, even the confluence of the whole emotional intelligence component as well. So in some ways, I'm kind of geeking out on this. So I really appreciate the time you have taken out of your day, a no doubt busy day, in a very beautiful city. I know you just had some snowfall on your mountain.
Well, yeah, early. It was, we just set a record for the coldest day in October when we're recording this. Sorry to date it, and get some snow. I said, okay, that's fine.
It is what it is.
I guess the skis better come out fairly soon then.
There you go. Well, listen, Ken, thank you again for taking the time out of your day. I truly appreciate it. I would love to find other ways, maybe we do some podcasting together, have some other conversations. But again, it's a gift just to have met you and learn more about you and your work. And to my listeners, thank you for your gift of the Quest for Purpose. And if they want to learn more, we're going to provide a vehicle for them to take the next steps as well. So
thanks, Howard. And listeners, take action on Howard's work and what he's doing so that you can contribute at the highest level. Thank you again.
There you have it, folks. We are, my God, just passing 40 minutes. So this is, I think, probably my longest podcast. But, so many nuggets here and insights that you can then take away. And you've got Ken's gift, the Quest for Purpose. Go out and get it. If you want to learn more about the personal style inventory, we're going to share information about that with you as well in his book, Why Aren't You More Like Me? So this is a valuable episode, folks, and I want you to understand that. So I'm feeling a little geeky right now because this is like I just eat this stuff up, and hopefully you'll find as equal value. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we will see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Thanks again.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.